Gen Zs could probably be the first generation to have access to this, and we might see some people live up to the age of 150. Well, how would you feel about that?
When we think of our life being short, we kind of push ourselves more because we're like...
It's a very interesting way to think about it. But do you think there could be a point where AI could replace friends?
Friend circles, relationships, the way we talk to people, that's going to change a lot. I feel like democracies are great, but then when it comes to this point where we're just always fighting against each other, it's completely counterproductive.
It's a side effect to the rights of protest, essentially.
The Infinite Perspective Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Infinite Perspective Podcast. I'm your host, Hamad Mustafa. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of hosting Mahreen Munir. She is one of the coolest 21-year-olds I've met. She is a student, an entrepreneur, and is most commonly known as the host of Karak with Mahreen, a podcast that dives deep into the topics of cultural and societal discourse. Mahreen has a star-studded academic record. She has multiple awards for her various different exceptional academic performances. She was also the youth representative for the UAE delegation at the 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference in Egypt. She also founded Entrepreneurica, which is a project that aims to serve as a catalyst for the entrepreneurial growth of youth by providing comprehensive internship programs and extensive workshops. I'm thrilled for today's episode, and so without further ado, Mahreen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. That was insane.
That was a lot to condense in.
I cannot believe you learned all of that and you said it so smoothly. Like, I purposely try to keep my introductions of my guests short because I know I'll forget, but that was so descriptive. Oh my goodness.
It was the content that was cool. And there's actually a little bit more further ado. So give me 1 second. It's...
Oh, yay. Is it chai?
Karak with Mahreen, Karak with Hamad.
Yay! I love Karak. Yeah. I mean, as you should know.
Yeah.
I love this. I mean, I saw the little bag and I mean, I didn't expect tea though.
Credit goes to Mom for this one.
Yay.
I told her, I honestly am probably going to butcher this. And she's going to watch and she's going to be, what the
what the hell did you do? Okay. No, I'm sure it's going to be awesome. Oh my God, thank you.
Of course. Karak, it's a universal drink.
Yeah, chai has no borders.
Exactly.
Literally. And you have you're more advanced than our podcast because this is actually homemade. Yeah. And all of my guests expect my Karak to be homemade, but it's not, which is so embarrassing. So thank you so much.
It was my mom's idea to have it homemade. I was gonna get it from the outside, but she's like, no, it's
That's so nice. Thank you to your mom and to you. Thank you.
Of course. So I want to start off with this one thing. So in Japanese philosophy, there is this concept that every person has three faces, right? So there's one face that we show to strangers, people that we don't know. There's one face that we show to our friends and family. And then there's one face that we only know within ourselves. Like that's the truest essence of ourselves. So everything that we know about every single person is only an approximation of who they are based on what we see, what we hear. And we create this image of them, which is a subjective image. It can be true, it cannot be true. It's based on the more data you have, like the more time you spend with someone, the more you know them, right? Yeah. But there's no objective understanding of them within ourselves. So if you were to describe yourself, the third face, the face that you only know about yourself, who would Mahreen be? And how would you come to that conclusion?
Wow, that was such a good question. Oh my God. Great way to start, but very, very introspective. How would I describe myself in the third face of Mahreen? I think that the face that I showcase to most people is that I'm a very jolly, chill person, I love life. And I do, that's for sure. And everyone tells me that I'm the type of person who kind of goes with the flow, enjoys everything that's coming in her way. But that, of course, all of that is for sure true. But when I'm alone, when I'm on my own, I'm definitely someone who overthinks so much.
Right.
And people don't realize that at all. Like they don't picture that, they don't associate that with me. But as you get to know me better, like I question things a lot. I overanalyze myself in different situations. Like, did I do this right? Did I do that right? What, like my future? There's so much overthinking that goes in my head.
I see.
And of course, I don't know if it's the same extent to how it is for other people. But if I would describe Mahreen when I'm alone, when it's just me, I am an overthinker. I'm an overanalyzer.
Okay.
But I'm also someone who tries to cherish every moment, even those overthinking moments. Like I love the days when I actually try to schedule a day where I would go somewhere alone in my car with my journal and just overanalyze everything that's happening in my life. But I cherish that.
And you journal?
Yeah.
Wow. I feel like that's relatable in the sense of, overly thinking about yourself and self-assessment. But I think that's also something that pushes us for constant improvement.
For sure.
And I mean, I'm sure with all of the things that you're doing in life, with your academics, with your entrepreneurial endeavors and your podcast, I'm sure that is what makes you stand out from others, that, not everyone, but certain people are just satisfied with whatever they have, and there's essentially no room for improvement. So I want to take this forward with the idea of our generation. So we're both Gen Zs. You're 21, I'm 22, and 21, another Gabriel. So our generation has had the fortune and perhaps misfortune in a certain regard that we have been brought up with this explosion of technological advances, where we've had the internet, we've had the we've had social media, we've had connectivity and access to information that has been unparalleled in human history. Previously, you had to, as how they say I believe it's an Arabic proverb that even if you have to seek knowledge, go to China if you have to, from Arabia to get it. And now you can, like anything you want to learn, artificial intelligence, economics, blah, 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 it's all out there on the internet. Aside from that, we're also essentially seeing the explosive growth of artificial intelligence and how that is further fueling, a future where productivity would not be as essential as it would have been in the previous decades. ChatGPT can come up with basically anything text-based that you would like, right? So where do you see our generation ending up in the next coming decades and the generations after that? And do you see a the cultural divide emerging and, culture itself globalizing and seeing a fusion of all of these mixes between Western and Eastern culture?
I think that's a very good question in terms of, first of all, I already like how you build up the question, like the context you provide.
It's pretty long,
fantastic.
But yeah,
no,
hope it gets the idea across.
But yeah, I think we've been privileged with the access of information that we've gotten as Gen Z. Like, there's so many things that's a part of our everyday that is beyond imagination for the previous generations. So we are definitely privileged. We are lucky. That's for sure. But there's a lot of problems that have come up with that have resulted from that. So I think one thing is our attention span has reduced tremendously.
Destroyed.
It has completely been destroyed.
Yeah.
And that is definitely, so there's two sides to that. It's obviously negative that our attention span has been destroyed. We can't concentrate on people. Like even when we're having conversations, we lose concentration so quickly. If you compare like how my dad talks and how I talk, my dad can go on and talk for like hours, but I physically and mentally get tired. You know what I mean? The podcast 1 hour is enough, but if it goes further, you know what I mean? So, I think there's a lot of disadvantages to that. But then when we recognize the fact that our attention span is decreasing with all of this increase in information, we realize that the school systems is also messed up. I know I'm talking about so many different things, but it just makes me realize that as we increase the access to information, we realize how messed up the education system that we're currently living in is, how messed up the lectures, the idea of lectures is. It is completely counterproductive. So when we talk about the environment that we live in, I feel like we're going to see a lot of reformations in that regard, especially when it comes to education.
Okay.
At least I hope. Because with the advent of AI and the increasing use of AI, people are realizing, even though they should have realized much earlier on, that students are going to use ChatGPT regardless of what you do. Like, regardless of whether we're going to restrict that or not, they're going to use it. Like, this is when calculators were introduced. When calculators were introduced, everyone was like, calculators should be banned. Like, this is completely going to hinder your mental capacity and your...
But they had to adapt to it.
But they adapted to it. And now we use calculators in school. And it's going to be the same thing in AI. That's when it comes to education. But when I also think about how Gen Z are as individuals, I've realized that we have, because of this information, we've become more aware of, what's happening in the world. We've become more aware of our rights. We've become more aware of the privileges that we have. And these are things that our parents and our grandparents did not know much about. They didn't actually try to counter whatever was told to them. They would just accept whatever was given to them. They would accept their norms. So I think what's great about Gen Z is that we take this information, we process it, and then we fight for when something is wrong.
Absolutely.
And that's beautiful. That's what I love about this generation. And I have faith that all those social issues that we talk about, like the toxicity in our cultures, the toxicity in, marriage pressures and things like that, I feel like all of that is going to reduce tremendously because of our generation.
Where do you see our culture, specifically South Asian, if I were to be more specific, Pakistani culture, evolving in the next couple of decades? Because from an economic perspective, South Asia is projected to be among the most richest regions in the world.
Yes.
Pakistan itself is projected to have a GDP in 2075 of around 13-something trillion, which is going to be the fifth largest. I mean, if you speak about population, essentially GDP is a product of how much you're producing in a given year. The more people you have, the more you're going to produce. It's no rocket science. So I see South Asia becoming a global player in terms of influence, in terms of culture and all these things. Just like you see it reflect in America, the largest economy in the world. And it has a proportional cultural influence as well with Hollywood and etc. Same with, for example, Japan. You see anime and blah, blah, blah. So with that, where do you see, in the context of all of these things, our culture evolving into in the next coming decades?
I think Pakistani culture, first of all, Pakistan has a great influence has the potential of influencing the world in such great magnitude that we don't realize. Yeah. And as you put out all the numbers, that it really has the potential. And I think Pakistanis themselves they have a lot of strength in them. I think Pakistanis, like when you talk about, I'm going to talk about India and Pakistan. And when you talk about Indians, a lot of people say that, Indians are incredibly smart. They're very intelligent. They're very intellectual, which is true. Indians are definitely very good in academics. And I think that, but from my perspective, what I've seen is that Indians, they're very, they're book smart. They're really good. Yeah. They're really book smart. And then Pakistanis, they're like life smart. They're like street smart. I think Pakistanis are very clever individuals.
You can kind of relate that to Americans. Like Germans are very book smart and academic, true. And they're very punctual. But Americans are they're kind of out of the box. Yeah, sometimes in creative. Good ways and sometimes in not so great ways. But I definitely see that. And so and you know how you've mentioned resilience. Pakistan is probably among the few countries in the world that people don't know this, but we have seen every crisis imaginable to essentially cut a country into multiple pieces, but we're still standing as one solid state. We've had corruption, we've had terrorist attacks almost every single day. We've had natural disasters. Pakistan has the largest elevation gradient in the world, which means, so you've got K2, which is the second tallest mountain in the world, and you've got, when water basically comes down from the glaciers, it's a lot of water. And when you get flooded and you're getting water from the second highest elevation in the world, and it goes all the way down to sea level, you have a large risk of catastrophic damage, and which is why the Indus civilization, it's one of the suspected reasons why it actually disappeared. It was because of climate change. But coming back to the point, we've seen a lot of these catastrophic issues, but we still stand as one nation, and we're still, I would like to say, I would like to see any other country live without electricity for an extended amount of time. I don't think any country in the first world could do that.
That's for sure.
But more specifically, how do you see the people change? Like, let's take an average, I don't want to say boomer. What would be the boomer equivalent to our country?
What would be the boomer equivalent to our country?
Like, you know how uncles, let's say uncles.
Boomers are...
boomers are older, but let's just say people in their 40s or 50s, like our parents.
Yeah.
How do you see this specific age group evolving in the future? Because whenever there's economic growth, you see a lot of other indicators change. For example, fertility rates, they automatically decrease in countries which are more economically progressing. You see that reflect in the indicators in Norway, Sweden, Scandinavia versus, for example, certain countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So this would likely obviously have an effect in Pakistan as well. And like I said, there would be a cultural evolution, which would be really interesting to think about.
Yeah, true.
So where do you see that specifically going if we go like deep into the intricacies of how people are, how people talk, what people find right, what people find wrong? How do you see that changing?
I think that when we talk about the current state of how the culture is in Pakistan, it has evolved tremendously from the past in terms of, even when we talk about the age in which girls get married, when we talk about this specific example, and the previous generation was much younger than how it is right now.
Yeah.
My mom got married when she was around 18. I think my grandmother got married even younger.
Yeah.
And that was normal, which makes sense because that's just how it was back then. And now people get married when they're 24, 28. So I think even this understanding that, you know, you can get married at a later age because you need to work, because you need to get an education. I think Pakistan is evolving in this idea that access to education and access to job opportunities is important also for women. This has evolved a lot in Pakistan, and in that sense, it's going to evolve a lot more, in my personal opinion.
I mean, like, if you need a developed economy, you need active 50% participation in both genders. So
exactly. And like, there are so many statistics that showcase that when you educate and when you support a girl, you're not just supporting the girl, you're supporting a whole village.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that will contribute. It's a domino effect. It'll contribute to the whole.
Women, I feel like women build societies. Men are just responsible for what we see, like the buildings and the infrastructure, but the actual society is something that women build.
That's very interesting. And that's for sure true. I think that women play a huge role in, everyone says they're the glue that sticks families together.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the same when it comes to societies, because those values that you learn, those the culture that you learn, it comes a lot from your mothers. It comes a lot from the females in your family. So educating them, like if the female in your family is educated, is striving for growth, is striving for more opportunities, she's gonna pass that down to her children as well. And so you're gonna see that continue to grow. It's exponential.
Yeah.
So I think that is definitely gonna continuously change, even though I feel like it's been changing relatively slowly in Pakistan, but it's getting there. So I still have hope. So in that sense, I think this acceptance is gonna grow a lot more as the country evolves. The one thing about Pakistan is that a lot of people who move out of Pakistan, who find jobs in other countries, most of them settle down outside of Pakistan.
Yeah.
And a lot of the fruits that you get from having an education abroad, Pakistan doesn't receive that back. So I feel like that is definitely something that continues to be a problem. There is definitely brain drain in Pakistan. And I don't know how that's going to be like in the future, because if that continues, then the culture, the evolution of the culture in Pakistan is going to evolve quite slowly, because that evolution comes from the education you receive abroad, the learnings you get when you go out, when you travel. But when you travel and you don't come back, then all those learnings stay with you. It doesn't come back.
Exactly. And I think, we can take China as an example, for example. Like when China started to grow, which was exponential, they had a lot of Chinese students studying in Ivy League educational institutes in America. So what happened was, when China had an adequate economic framework to the point where you would be paid fairly and you would receive a lifestyle good enough for you to move back, China started incentivizing its people that were abroad, that were specialists and the best in their fields in engineering, science, in medical science. They incentivized them coming back by giving them essentially the same benefits that they received over there, and which we in turn see reflect in China's unbelievable economic growth. So I think this could potentially happen in the future as well, because Pakistanis, I would say, I want to say are the most patriotic people in the world, most likely.
Oh, yeah.
Because
they are quite patriotic.
if you have a dictatorship, people aren't really patriotic. There's always rebellion. But in Pakistan, regardless of who you're supporting, you're always patriotic. I think according to a statistic, Pakistan is only the second in the world in a survey where they asked, would you fight for your country? And I believe 89% of people said yes, we would. And number one, I think, was Vietnam, not by a huge margin. It was like 91%. So we are very patriotic people. And I'm sure if given a fair chance, I hope I'm not quoting Joe Biden. I think this is exactly what he said. If given a fair chance, I think Pakistanis can definitely excel in their respective fields. So...
But that can also pose problems. Like, I know having that feeling of being patriotic to your country is so important. And I love that about Pakistanis. Yeah. But that can create so much, that can create people that are quite stubborn. And I feel like if you question anything about the norms there, they get super mad. And I know they're trying to protect their culture. They're trying to protect their country, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
But that also results in a lot of rejection to new ideas.
Absolutely. So I wrote this article. I had this political theory hypothesis. So I basically said that, in the theory of evolution, there's the Darwinian notion that organisms evolve based on mutation, and whatever gives them the longest lifespan, and if they're able to increase their chances of survival, that particular trait is going to move on, and it's going to. So like giraffes, why do they have long necks? Because they can be able to reach long, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's the same with society. I kind of applied the same idea. If you have political instability, if you have problems, people are going to try to think of solutions to those problems. If you have no problems, no one's going to think of any solutions, right? And typically, if you have a problem like, for example, culture where you're not open-minded, you're going to have rebellions. You're going to have people that rebel to that idea. You're going to have protests, which is why freedom of thought is essential to society
sure.
because it acts as a medium for evolution to take place. And being conservative is a good thing because it's a good thing to a certain extent because you need to have your own culture, you need to have an identity, but it needs to evolve. Culture is not always perfect, as we know. And I think what you're talking about is more of toxic nationalism rather than patriotism.
True.
I don't agree with France's President Macron on a lot of things, but he said this one thing. He's like, patriotism is like it's the truest service you can do to a country, but not toxic nationalism, where you defend every bad thing that your country has done.
Yeah.
So
there can definitely be a fine line between the two. There's a difference between patriotism and nationalism, and I feel like it can be quite easy for Pakistanis to cross that line. And this is not just about Pakistan. I've seen this in a lot of other countries, but when we specifically talk about Pakistanis, I feel like it's very important to have open discussions, important to have this open dialogue, but a lot of the conversations there are about bashing someone, about bashing this person who did this because he didn't agree to this ideology.
Absolutely.
But instead of discussing about, how do we improve our society? How do we improve our country? I think the conversations need to go a long way before we can see that cultural change, because there's so much political instability right now in Pakistan. There's a lot of economic problems happening right now in Pakistan. And I still feel like the people of Pakistan, I cannot generalize this to everyone, but I still feel like a lot of people focus on the wrong issues. They focus a lot on everything besides what's actually happening. Like they don't talk about the actual economic issues that's happening. They don't talk about how do we solve this problem. They just like to argue about, this guy is better than this guy, that political leader is better than that guy. I feel like democracies are great, but then when it comes to this point where we're just always fighting against each other, it's completely counterproductive.
It's a side effect to the rights of protest, essentially.
Yeah.
But I absolutely get what you mean. And I think an important ingredient that our society and a lot of other societies in general are missing is tolerance.
Yeah.
Which is essential to actually solving your problems.
Yeah.
If you don't even identify an issue in the first place, then you're never going to get around to actually solving it. So that's a very important thing. So what do you think right now at this moment is, I think there's a lot of issues, but what if you were to quote one specific issue that you think is in our society culturally, what would that be? And how do you think we would fix it? This is a very tough question.
Yeah, because
and not intentionally. Okay, I'll just sum it up in a different way. What do you think is one of the most significant cultural problems in our specific culture?
I think that, so I'd like to compare, even though a lot of people have problems when I compare, but I'd like to compare Western cultures to Eastern cultures, to Desi cultures, actually Eastern cultures in general. Mm-hmm. The thing that I've noticed is that the Western cultures, they're quite individualistic. They focus a lot on yourself. They focus a lot on you as an individual.
Do you think that's a good thing to a certain extent?
Yeah. So there are beautiful parts of both cultures, but moderation is key for everything.
Yeah.
So I do think that being independent, and I talk a lot about being independent, women being independent, financially independent. So focus on the self. I really do like that in the West, but I don't think that's, like, you cannot base your entire happiness on your self-achievements. You need to base your happiness also on how other people in your life are doing, on your relationships, on your family, which I think Pakistanis or Eastern cultures, they do really well. They focus so much on families, and it's a very collectivist society where they focus a lot on the well-being of your parents, your grandparents. Like, you can never imagine a Pakistani sending their grandparents to like a nursing home.
Oh, absolutely not.
Like, you can never imagine that, right? Which is beautiful because they have such a beautiful connection. Again, moderation is key, because I feel like if you are so selfless where you care about only your family, nothing else, where you're not actually striving for yourself or your individual achievements, then that can also be wrong. Because a lot of women I've seen, that I talk a lot about women because I am a woman, and that's my perspective. But a lot of women I've seen, they give up their careers, they give up their educations when they start a family, and sometimes it's necessary, which makes complete sense. There's no judgment there. That's okay if you do that, if you genuinely want to do that. But a lot of women I've seen sacrifice that, not because they wanted to, but because that's just what's required of them as a woman. And then you hear and then when they get married, they feel happy for in the beginning, you're going through the honeymoon phase, but then after that, you start feeling sad because you start feeling alone. You don't have your personal achievement. You don't have your own personality. Like,
absolutely,
your personality is completely dependent on the people around you. Like, you don't have your sense of self. That's when you start to realize that, and you feel lonely. And then your parents and your grandparents say, okay, have a child, because that will help you through that loneliness. But that's such a temporary solution. The main solution is when you build yourself as a person. So when you actually get married, you want to get married. And when you leave your career, it's because you still have your achievements. So when you get married, you still have your achievements. And even if you have to leave them, you don't leave them in vain. You leave them because you're like, I've done all of this, and now I'm okay with focusing on my family now.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think this excessive prioritization of your community can become toxic.
Okay.
And it's not, again, I'm talking about moderation is key. Like, I'm not saying that it's bad altogether. It's just that when you care so much about only your family and only what people in your society are thinking, then who are you as a person? You're never going to be able to know. So I think mixing, you were mentioning this, or I think you mentioned this before, like, how do we mix things from two different cultures together? I think these are two elements. One is of being individualistic in the Western culture, and one is of being collectivistic in the Eastern culture. I think finding a balance between two is really what's important.
I think you summed it up very intelligently, and I actually have the same thoughts on this particular subject. It's a lot of the times in these sort of issues, there's always two extremes, and it's most rational to identify where you can take the best of both worlds. Yeah. And I think we can kind of see that because we've been raised in the UAE. True. And the UAE is basically perhaps the most cosmopolitan place on earth. You've got basically everyone from every country here. So you can essentially compare and identify, okay, so this is what this culture does well, and this is what we have. Yeah. Is this something that perhaps maybe we can take out and learn from their culture? Yeah. So absolutely. And, pertaining to families and just being a collective nuclear family, and in regards to women not actually participating after getting married, I think everyone has an individual ambition and a drive to do something in life. There's millions of women in Pakistan, and there could have been many women out of those that could have been exceptional scientists or doctors or something. But because of the way society is, it's not always encouraged to go out and do something after you're married. So I think it's essential that we would see that change going forward.
It's changing. It's definitely changing. Like, people think that I'm very negative about Pakistani culture. I'm not. I'm just questioning certain norms which still exist today. Like, if you don't want to accept that, then I don't know what world you're living in.
I think it's important to be critical.
Yes, exactly.
Like we've talked about this before. If you don't specifically criticize a certain part of yourself, which is my country, my identity, how are you even going to improve in the first place, right?
Exactly.
And so, that's an essential. I don't know. an interesting thing about Pakistanis is we will roast the shit out of our own country. If you hear me sometimes. So I studied economics specifically because I looked at the issues which Pakistan was having.
Wow.
And then I basically studied like every major economy and their growth and the boom bust cycles and recessions. And I was like, how do we get out of this, right? And that's because, you want to understand what's actually causing that problem because of that kind of patriotism and stuff.
Yeah.
But an interesting thing about Pakistan, we will criticize the hell out of our own country. But I think if we see any other, like a foreigner, talk shit, we go into like attack mode.
Or even if you see a Pakistani but with a different accent because they're like adopting a foreign, they're like, oh, you're not actually Pakistani.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, because I'm saying this from personal experience because people attack me a lot just because I have a different accent. And like, I don't know, I was born and raised here. It's out of my control,
Yeah.
But that's so true. Like I've seen that so much in Pakistan. And like, I understand that. Like, for example, if we're talking about Pakistan, we're talking about the negatives, like I'm okay with it. But if like my friends who come from Brazil and from other countries, they talk about it, I would go into like self-defense mode.
Yeah.
So I understand that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I've had that too, like many times. I go and say, oh no, you messed with the wrong guy on this.
Yeah, but it's just like, again, it just goes back to being open-minded. Like you should not just completely reject the other person's idea. You should represent your culture well.
Oh, absolutely.
You should definitely defend your culture, your identity, but it goes back to the idea of being tolerant and being open-minded.
Exactly.
Like that's just so important to evolve.
So this is probably a very volatile area of conversation, but I think it's going to be even more important to have that element of tolerance going forward because of the way the world is evolving. So Western civilization has significantly changed in the past 2 decades because of various different reasons. We've seen cultural changes. This will inevitably be the case in Pakistan as well going forward. And
I mean, it slowly is actually.
You can express this. You can have activism, but we need to be tolerant. We can't just say, we're going to put you guys in jail. We're going to do this. I think it's essential to sit down and listen. So with me, if I have if I have a certain belief, instead of looking for things that confirm that belief, I try to find things that disprove it. And this is what Einstein said. He said, my hypotheses and my theories, I will need to do an infinite number of experiments to prove that they are correct. But just one experiment can prove that my theory is false. And this is deductive reasoning. And the same applies for basically anything. Yeah. So any belief that we have, we need to actively try to find anything that disproves it. Yeah. So an important way a good way to do that is to find someone who has the complete opposite view as you and listen to them and try to understand their point. Like, why do you think this is the case, right? Try to convince me. And then you can have a just, rational point of view that is backed by actual logic and not by sentiment specifically.
But that's very hard to do, right? Especially in our culture.
It is hard to do, but
it's important.
It's important, and it's all about habit building. Yeah. And I think this comes individually. Yeah. And again, as we've spoken about this before, and how you summed it up in a brilliant way, tolerance is the most important ingredient in actually enabling this to happen. Yeah. So I want to touch on another very theoretical, crazy idea.
Okay.
So
let's do it.
Gen Zs, we've seen an unprecedented boom in technologies, computers, etc. And it's been mostly a digital revolution. But because of this digital revolution right now, so there's 3 types of AI. There's artificial narrow intelligence, which is AI that can execute basic tasks. Mm-hmm. So like ChatGPT or Siri on your phone, right? And it's trained on a limited amount of data, and it can only respond or give an output based on what it's been trained on, right? I see a lot of people getting scared of ChatGPT is going to take over the world. It's not going to be able to do anything. That's not how this particular AI works. It doesn't understand anything. It's just giving you an approximation of the information that it was fed.
It's just predicting, yeah.
Exactly. And that's ANI, artificial narrow intelligence. The next step is going to be artificial general intelligence. And that is AI that can essentially do anything that a human being can. And it will have the actual ability to understand and to self-improve. After that, we have ASI, artificial superintelligence. And this is another theoretical concept. I personally believe that if you have an AI, or let's say you have a human being, that human being does not have an attitude. It does not have preferences. It doesn't have days where it wants to work, and it doesn't have days it just works, and it has access to every information on earth. Mm-hmm. And it has unlimited computing capability. You just add more hardware, it gets more and more intelligent. That person would essentially be a super intelligence if you think about it, right? If there's no limits to it. Mm-hmm. So if we achieve this AGI, artificial general intelligence, where we just give it understanding, I think it would be very, very quick where we would see it go on to this next phase, which is artificial superintelligence. And as a consequence of that, we're going to see advancements in medical science, physics, space travel, etc. So essentially what I'm trying to say is the next 5 decades, like we can actually, this is going to be on the internet, right? We can watch this a couple decades later and see if I'm right. Technological advances are going to be insane. Yeah. It's going to be exponential. So in regards to that, if we have AI that can understand, let's assume that it also has consciousness. How do you see humans changing in the context of having digital entities whom are essentially like humans and can understand you and speak to you? How do you see humanity changing in that context?
Yeah, that's...
I'm sorry if that was a long question, by the way.
That's like very in-depth. But yeah, I think AI it's had a huge impact on the world. We've seen it today, and people are already super scared, which I completely agree with you. Like the human intelligence and the human rationale and the human side of human beings cannot be replaced, in my
Absolutely,
opinion. Never be replaced, even as AI advances. And I think that, like today, when we talk about today, AI is already taking over jobs. That's true. But what you see AI doing is it's taking over mundane jobs. It's taking over redundant jobs. It's taking over jobs that were relatively mundane. So
do you think that's a good thing?
I think that this is the way the world will grow much at a bigger
kind of like the printer
pace. Yes. When the printer came in, even when books came in, like I remember reading about like books coming in and everyone thinking that this is going to be the detriment of our society because books are going to make us like, it's going to stray it's going to reduce our social skills. It's going to stray our attention to like, to corrupt knowledge instead of like, there was like,
that's really interesting.
When I was reading, I was like, what? Like, so everything that comes in, there's going to be this fear, like every big technological breakthrough has like that curve where in the beginning, only the early adopters adopted and they actually, and then it goes through a phase of like rejection where everyone's like, no, this is scary, this is bad. And then in the end, everyone's going to love it. So it's going to be the same with AI, whether you like it or not. It's going to advance. It's going to be in our worlds. You're going to see it every single day of our lives. But how do we change? How do we see the change in humanity? That's a very interesting question because I mean, even if you compare humanity now to how it was before, we've changed in lots of ways. We've changed in terms of our attention span, as I mentioned before. We've changed even in our posture and our like. I saw this picture, this study that was done that was showcasing how our postures, the human being posture, is going to look like in like a couple 100 years.
Yeah.
And it's like we're like so hunched and our fingers are like this, looks like so scary. But like it makes sense because of how we evolve and how like there are more
Exactly.
and more devices. So
In that, I just want to add this one thing. I don't think we're gonna have like really hunched backs or those fingers. I believe I've seen that too. That was more of like a satirical representation of what.
Simulation, yeah.
But I've said this to my friends before. I've told them, invest in spinal surgery, invest in companies that specialize in spinal surgery technology, because Gen Zs are going to have the most back issues in the world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we're gonna see these companies in extreme demand with their breakthroughs and their treatments for spinal issues. So
That's
like, it's a
true,
good idea to invest in these companies
it's
right now.
crazy to think that even our physical being is gonna change. That's gonna evolve.
But do you think there could be a point where AI could replace friends?
I mean, we're seeing that today. Have you seen those influencers have those bots?
Snapchat.
Oh yeah, Snapchat AI has.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Snapchat AI, which is like it's so weird talking
Have
to.
you seen
like,
the memes where people are talking to their Snapchat AI and it's just like, we're so lonely, we're talking to the AI?
that is lonely to think about. Like
Yeah.
it's so like. But anyway, even those influencers, they're creating bots so that you can have a conversation with this person that you idolize. And I think that in terms of like friend circles, relationships, the way we talk to people, that's gonna change a lot. Like when I was saying that, when you compare now to how it was before, like my grandmother always tells me that she didn't have phones. What they would do, like when they're bored, is literally just like go outside with their siblings and like, I don't know, look at a tree or like just talk to each other. Like, like their speaking skills are so different from ours. Like I mentioned this before, but it's so true. Like they can talk for hours because they didn't need to use phones to communicate. They just talk to a person.
I feel so bad about this.
But it's so true, right?
My parents are going to watch this, but the thing is with my dad and a little bit with my mom as well, it's exactly how you described it. My dad can go on for hours and hours and hours. And I am like, my brain is in agony.
It just shuts down, right?
It's not his fault. It's my fault. It's because of my fried Gen Z attention span. It's like, I zone out. You know? And a lot of young people think that it's ADHD, where I don't think it's ADHD. Everyone self-diagnoses and says they have ADHD, but it most likely has to do with this
evolution of
exactly. And I have this thing. I tell my friends when, like, in the future, assuming I become a centimillionaire or like a multi-millionaire or something, it's just a thought experiment.
It's gonna happen.
I wanna thank you. Same with you. I wanna buy like a house in a village in southern Italy, and I want to go there with no mobile devices or electricity or anything for like 2 weeks to reset the dopamine release.
Oh my God. You have no idea how bad I want to do that. Like I've been thinking about, those retreats, like you just go in and like you have no phone. Like just imagine not using your phone for like 2 weeks. Imagine not using your phone just for an hour. I think even that is like crazy to us. Like as soon as we finish this, we're gonna go to our phones. Like it's just how we are, which is sad. Like I'm talking about this, but it's just,
it's true.
It's true, right?
And I think it would be very interesting to see how an extended amount of time without using these would reset the brain.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't think I've ever experienced this where I've not used my phone for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think it would definitely be beneficial in fixing that attention span for a lot of people. A
digital detox. That's so much needed. And I think even these type of like digital retreats and stuff, I think they're going to become more and more popular in the future. I think I think that's gonna be like a big business as well.
Yeah,
I think people are gonna realize that they need this for their mental health.
And I think there's companies that actually come up with these phones where you don't have any apps and it's just, you can only call with these.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's boring.
It's boring, but I guess
it makes sense. Yeah.
I guess some people would need it.
Yeah, for sure.
Like phone addiction is a serious issue right now. And I think it's increasing with the next generations, the alpha generation, because like you literally see parents handing out mobile devices to kids that are a few months old.
Yeah.
Like,
that's true. Like I mean, it's hard to find. I understand, like, parents, they struggle a lot.
Yeah,
Like, it's hard to
understandable.
find distraction, but like when you just resort to that method, it really affects the child's brain and the child's development, which people don't realize, and that's actually a big problem as well.
What age do you think kids
Should
should have a phone?
So, to be honest, I'm thinking of my younger sister. When did she get a phone? I think she got it when she was like maybe 10 or 11. I think around that age. And how do I feel about that? I think that by the time she got it, even though it sounds so young, it just made sense, because for her to be, it just felt like she was the only one kind of excluded from everything that's happening. I don't think it was 10, maybe it was 11 or 12, around that age. And I think around that age makes sense, even though I got it when I was older, but around that age makes sense, because after a while, when you don't have a phone, you actually do get excluded from the rest of the world. And even though we can talk lots about the disadvantages of having a phone at a young age, but it really builds you as a person. It really builds, like, in one of my episodes, we were talking about, one of my guests, she talked about this movie, Rocky and Ronnie. Have you watched it?
I don't think so. May have heard of it.
It's so, like, it was a recent movie. Like, everyone's
is it
talking about
Hollywood?
Rocky or Ronnie. No, it's Bollywood.
I'll check it out.
It's so good, so good. So they were talking, so there was this scene of Rocky, okay? And he was really made fun of because Ronnie, his girlfriend's family, they were, they had like a very Western culture where they were very sensitive to certain things in the Desi culture. So a lot of the toxicity in fat shaming someone and things like that, they didn't do that, okay? But then Rocky was a very Desi person.
Yeah.
So there was a scene when he was expressing the fact that everyone in her family keeps making fun of him for the things that he says, because he comes from a very like Desi culture. So some of the words he uses, some of the things he says, people make fun of him, and people kind of cancel him because they're like, oh, you're being like, I don't know, you're being racist, or you're being super rude, you're being offensive. And everyone just found anything that he said offensive.
Yeah.
So he was just saying that, like, I was not born and raised in a culture where I had access to this knowledge that you guys have to have. And that's so true. Like, we talk a lot about social issues. We talk a lot about toxicity in our cultures, but we are privileged to be able to talk about that because we have access to that information. We have access to the knowledge, and some people just don't know that this is wrong.
Exactly.
So I forget what the question initially was, but what was your question again?
I think we just kind of went into when should kids have a phone.
Oh,
But
that the reason I brought this up was that it builds you as a person to have a phone at a young age, because you get access to that information
an understanding of what the world
growing
is.
up. Yeah. So I don't know, 10, 11, I don't know what you think of that.
I think I think I got mine I was 13 or 14.
Yeah, I think same for me.
It was like a Nokia phone. And then I actually my parents didn't want to get me like an actual phone, because they were like, oh, it's bad, blah blah blah.
Yeah, same for me.
But I started making money from Minecraft. I used to make Minecraft animations when I was 14.
Wow.
And so I actually bought my own phone, like an actual smartphone.
Oh, by earning your...
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, you're not going to buy it. I'll buy it myself.
Screw it.
What did your parents say?
They couldn't really do anything. They were like, okay, so we can't like tell him no, because it's going to discourage him from earning more money and doing stuff. So, but yeah,
wow, that's the best way to defy your parents.
Yeah, it's F it. I'll just
but even my parents didn't want to get me a phone. Actually, it was my sister who got it first. She's older, And so they got her an iPod instead of a phone because they're like, there's only music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Was it like that, the one with the buttons, or was it?
Yeah, it was the one with the buttons, the small, the old version. Yeah, that's how we started, but we weren't smart enough to like earn our own money and buy it ourselves. So that's not my story, but that's very smart.
It's more funny than smart. It was just, that is funny. Yeah. I used to play Minecraft, and then I don't know if you've like ever played it, but it's like we had like this whole community, and it kind of pushes you to do something. And I'd like you become an animator, because there were YouTubers that used to record gameplays and upload them. And so they wanted animations as content for their channel so people would watch it.
Wow, cool.
Yeah,
I can't believe you did that.
They actually got a lot of views. And because of that, I got into like design and 3D design.
Very cool.
And I moved into like, VFX. So with like in the Avengers movie, you see Iron Man and stuff.
Okay. Like
so yeah, I moved into that.
Cool.
And I started like designing houses and watches and stuff. And so it kind of progressed from that.
Wow. And you continue to do that.
Yeah.
Do you use AI now to help you design?
No, I've never used AI in any
Would
of
you
my
want
design.
to?
No. Honestly,
really?
No, I would not. I think I would understand people that use it, but I think true creativity comes from within humans. So
yeah.
Yeah.
But I still think that AI can be a tool to help. And
absolutely.
It's okay if you don't want to use it, but I'm just generally saying that like even when it comes to brainstorming creativity, I feel like AI is
I think it's essential.
Such a great tool.
Yeah. Like I always use it for anything that's related to brainstorming. I know people that are really critical of this. They're like, oh, like people who use this are going to become dumb and stuff. And I'm like, okay, dude, tell me this one thing. Do you use Wikipedia? Right? Yes, I do use Wikipedia. Okay, what if Wikipedia could respond to you like a professor? Would you like to have that privilege? And they're like, yeah. And then I'm like, that's basically what ChatGPT is.
Does.
Right?
True.
So it's absurd to think. It's kind of like the printer, right? You are going to have to adapt, or you're going to get left behind. And that's just how it is. It's the reality of the world. It is fortunate for some people, and for other people, not so much.
It's also like how you use it. Like, I know a lot of people are using it to write their assignments and things along those lines. And even if I can say that, you should not use it for your assignments. You can use it to help, but don't make it write everything. But I know students are going to do that regardless. So,
oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like students are going to do that regardless. Yeah.
I've got friends. I'm not going to say any names, obviously, but I've got friends who have literally gotten their degrees from ChatGPT.
I'm not surprised. And like the school system shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Like I feel like teachers, professors, like none of them should be surprised that people are using chat. Like no matter what you do, they're going to use it. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's inevitable. Like you're going to have to adapt. And then like we mentioned before, you're going to get left behind if that's not the case.
Exactly.
So, I mean, yeah, it's going to be crazy how the world's going to move on in the next like 5 years. And that AGI thing we talked about, it might become a reality sooner than we think. So say in the next 5 years, it could be a potential possibility.
Which thing?
AGI, artificial general intelligence.
General intelligence. Yeah.
Super smart
in
AI.
5 years.
Potentially, like that could be the case. Because when you heard about ChatGPT, right? It has grown exponentially so far, and it continues to do so.
Yeah.
And so, the CEO of OpenAI, the company that came up with ChatGPT, Sam Altman, they fired him, right? And they said it was due to like, he did not communicate with the board well, blah, blah, blah. But there's memes about this, and some people were saying it's actually the fact that they made AGI. They didn't tell anyone, but they achieved it. And the AGI told the company, they told the board to fire him. Yeah. And now it's going to control the company. But
there are actually companies, like there was a company, I don't know, somewhere in Europe, I think, where they hired their first AI CEO.
Really?
Yeah. I can't remember the country, but I found out recently. It's like crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah. So I'm not surprised that this will be something that will really be a part of our lives. And this just, of course, humanity is going to evolve, but I feel like it's going to evolve for the better, because every time a new technological advancement has come into this world, it has upgraded our skills.
Absolutely.
And that's that's going to
And
happen.
I think we don't have a lot of time left, but I'm just going to quickly condense this question in. So with Gen Z's technological breakthroughs in the next decades, there might be a real possibility that in the field of longevity, living more than like 100 years, for example, might become an actual reality. Stem cell rejuvenation technology, etc. There's a lot of different things that are absolutely mind-blowing. So Gen Zs could probably be the first generation to have access to this, and we might see some people live up to the age of 150. I'm saying that this is very theoretical, but again, it might be possible. How would you feel about that? Like knowing that there's a possibility that we could live 150 years or even more.
I think anyone that like hears the idea of like living longer, of course it sounds exciting. It's like, oh my God, you know, I can see more of the world, I can travel more, I can live more. I don't know how our health would be during that period.
Let's assume it's like you're in your 60s or something.
Oh, like that.
Yeah, like you're just old, but
You're
it's not too bad.
Of course it sounds exciting. I think like the longevity of humanity has evolved tremendously. Our lifespan has evolved. Like, I don't know, in the 1800s or so, it was just like 30 years, like the life expectancy. And now it's like 85.
Yeah.
So it's like more than doubled. And I think I wouldn't be surprised that that's how it's gonna happen in the future. How I feel about that, it's cool. It's definitely exciting to think about. Like, I'm confused because when I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna see more of the world. I have more time to do whatever I wanna do. Like, there's so much that I can do. I have so many more years. But at the same time, when we think of our life just being like 80 years or whatever years, when we think of our life being short, we kind of push ourselves more because we're like...
That's a very interesting way to think about it.
Because when I was thinking about it, I'm like, when I know I'm gonna, like after this age, I'm gonna be like too old to do anything. I'm like, oh, I need to work harder. I need to like do something before. I mean, it's not a deadline, but it's just that.
I agree. Yeah, I understand. I completely understand what you mean.
So when we keep extending our lifespan, will that motivation go away? You know, it's just like, I don't know. That's just my personal perspective, because thinking about my future, about like the number of years I have, I think for most people, it really pushes you.
It does. Absolutely. That's a very interesting way to think about it. I actually didn't think about this before. And I think we might see a lot of discussions pop up in the near future. Yeah. You know, a lot of people are going to start talking about this.
What do you think about it?
I would prefer, honestly, a natural life. Like, obviously, if I can get a longer lifespan through better healthcare and better nutrition, just like the whole world has increased in its lifespan, that would be a good thing. But artificially increasing
it's crazy, right? I don't know how I feel about that. Yeah.
Because I completely agree with what you said. There's not a lot that you're going to be able to do, you know. And it's weird to think about people being able to choose when they want to die. You know, it's kind of crazy. How
can you control? Like, that was the one thing about your life that, I mean, there are lots of things that are not in your control, but that was like the one completely unknown part of your life. So
yeah. Anyways, it's been an awesome podcast, and I wish we could actually take this further. And it's been a long conversation, but it would have been even better if this would have been longer. You are
awesome, honestly. Like, all your questions, so cool, so interesting. From the first question up to the end, honestly, I loved it.
Thank you so much, and it's been an absolute pleasure. And you've essentially summed up a lot of things very, very intelligently. And yeah, so. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, we'll wrap this up now.
Thank you.